What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Courtside podcast here on the Basketball Network. I'm Caleb, that's Connor, and today we're going to be recapping the NBA trade deadline. We had to make sure and get an extra podcast there in for you just because it was so crazy. And Connor, I think we got to start off with maybe what we led off the last show with, but that was Luka Doncic getting traded to the Los Angeles Lakers with Anthony Davis coming back to the Dallas Mavericks. I know we talked about it last episode, but just a crazy set of events that kind of started rolling the NBA trade deadline. I'll pass it over to you, but what's your initial thoughts on it and how are we feeling now that the NBA trade deadline is officially over?
Yeah, quite the exciting time. Probably one of the craziest deadlines we've had in recent years. I certainly, definitely the past 5 years is by far the biggest one we've had. But I think some interesting things have happened. Going back to the Luka trade, I feel like that trade kind of reset the value of like players being traded. Because obviously we saw Donovan Mitchell go for what, like 5 first round picks or something like that. Rudy Gobert fetched a lot of first round picks. We really didn't see that this time around. And it's not like there were small names being moved, which we'll get into more details about the trades in a second. But I definitely think some of the value of players and picks have kind of shifted because of that Luka trade.
No, I agree. And obviously, with that Luka trade, it really turned into the Lakers were having to scramble to maybe make another trade to replace AD, and we saw them do that as well. But the other trade that happened before it really got kicked off, that was De'Aaron Fox going to the San Antonio Spurs and Zach LaVine ending up there in Sacramento. And we actually saw De'Aaron Fox already in his debut. And that duo of De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama looked really exciting. I think they got some good stuff cooking down in San Antonio. How about you?
Yeah, no, looking pretty scary. Fox, what, 24 points, 13 assists since his debut. After the first game, it's looking like the Spurs kind of won that trade. Once again, just one game, only one player has played. We'll see how the rest of it shakes out throughout the season, though.
For sure. Well, let's jump into what has happened in the past couple of days. And the biggest story for me is that this Jimmy Butler saga is now come to an end. And it kind of ended in a way that I wasn't necessarily expecting. And that is we saw Jimmy Butler getting traded to the Golden State Warriors. So not his preferred destination of the Phoenix Suns, but he got traded to the Golden State Warriors. And with that, the Heat received Andrew Wiggins, Kyle Anderson, PJ Tucker, Golden State Warrior first round pick in 2025 that's top 10 protected. And really, the Warriors got Jimmy Butler. And we also saw a few other people go. Dennis Schroder went. He got moved around a bunch today. Lindy Waters, Josh Richardson on Detroit. And a lot of moving pieces in this one. So it ended up being a 4-team trade. Connor, initial thoughts, Butler in the Bay, teaming up with Steph Curry and Draymond Green.
Yeah, well, just a quick note at first. The Warriors originally tried to trade for Kevin Durant. There was a trade in place, but I think Durant shut it down pretty quick, and so that's why the Warriors ended up going after Jimmy Butler. After all, after Curry and Draymond and the front office, we're not, going to give away anything now, just so we can win this year. Well, they all look like a bunch of liars now, pretty much. But I will say, I think it's interesting they didn't give away some certain players that I was kind of expecting them to. So, just off the bat, they kept Podziemski, Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and Gary Payton II, which are all pretty good players, all players, that are playing, decent minutes. I know Kuminga's hurt currently. But I was expecting at least one of these players to get traded, but the Warriors retained them all. I will say losing, the 2025 pick might hurt a little bit, but for what they gave up, I think it's a good deal.
I agree. And I think for the Warriors, they were really just on this 2 timeline thing where they were trying to win now, but they were also trying to develop for the future. But this move for me kind of solidifies the fact that this organization is wanting to win now. They don't want to waste Steph Curry's career. And as you mentioned, they were going after Kevin Durant at the beginning and had a deal in place, but I guess there's too much bad blood between Kevin Durant and the Golden State Warriors, unfortunately. But before we really dive in a little more to this Jimmy Butler and the fit with the Warriors, Connor, I did want to mention Kevin Durant was an unexpected, like, hot commodity around the league for this trade deadline. And obviously, whenever Kevin Durant's on the block, everybody's willing to take him and willing to give up a lot. But we didn't even know Kevin Durant was in trade talks until a couple of days ago. But I saw reports it was Mavericks, the Warriors, the Heat, the Rockets, even the Grizzlies and the Wolves took a swing at him today, right before and all the way up into the deadline to see if they could get a deal done. And I just think there might be some bad blood in Phoenix now because Kevin Durant, from all signs it seemed, didn't even know the Phoenix Suns were even thinking about listening to any sort of offers for him. And now you go about hearing all these different teams and all these different discussions going on. I don't know, and this might be something we have to watch up until the summer. Kevin Durant might be traded this summer because I don't necessarily know after that if that's a place that you want to be.
Yeah, definitely an interesting situation. However, I think if Kevin Durant wanted, to leave, I feel like he probably would have, just because the Warriors were very close to a trade to acquire him, like I said, but he just didn't want to go there. He didn't want to go to Golden State. Now, I'm not sure, if all those other teams that were pursuing him, maybe the Suns just didn't like whatever it was they were going to get back. Um, but I don't know. I just have a feeling if the Suns agreed about a certain price for Durant from a team, and he was like, "Yeah, let's go," I feel like that would have happened. So I think two things: either Durant wanted to stay in Phoenix, or the Suns just never got a package, that they liked for him. Which I'm assuming that would have been an expensive package, but this past week, never know what a player will go for these days. Um, so yeah, no, definitely interesting. I think Phoenix itself is going to be interesting, just because I don't think it was quiet, that they were kind of shopping Bradley Beal around, even with his no trade clause, which I feel like there was rumors at some point this season of maybe Devin Booker being traded, which is crazy because I feel like he's Mr. Phoenix, been there his whole career. So I don't know. I think the situation in Phoenix is just a little weird right now.
I agree. And they did make a small move. They traded Jusuf Nurkic and a first round pick from 2026 to the Hornets for Cody Martin, Misic, and a 2026 second round pick. I really think that it was just because Nurkic and the Suns, that experiment just did not work out whatsoever. I don't think it was necessarily good on the court or in the locker room. So, really, just a trade to kind of get him out of there. Um, Honestly, thinking back on it, they might have been better just keeping Aiton because that's really what this came from, right? The Aiton trade
Mhm.
and brought in Yusuf Nurkic, and it has not gone well. But let's get back into Jimmy Butler. Connor, I'm interested to see what are your thoughts on this Warriors team, the fit with Jimmy Butler, and maybe expectations for this year and the season and the next season because he did actually immediately signed a 2-year, $121 million extension that's going to keep him in Golden State through the 2026-2027 season.
I actually don't hate the fit of Jimmy Butler here. So I will say this: he's not as good of a 3-point shooter as Andrew Wiggins is, but if you look at pretty much any other stat, he's a better player. Defensively and like offensively inside the arc, he is a better player than Andrew Wiggins. Um, but that being said, shooting is going to be a concern now because you did trade one of your better 3-point shooters in Andrew Wiggins. Obviously, you got Curry. Um, and obviously, Kaminga can get hot. He kind of comes and goes. But I feel like we've talked about this all season. None of their players have been consistent. Especially now, Draymond coming back. Like Jimmy Butler and Draymond, like not high percentage 3-point shooters, might get a little crowded out there. Um, but I will say I don't hate the fit. I mean, Jimmy Butler is an incredible player. Pretty much everywhere he's gone, he's dominated. He's molded in. Like it's not like he's played bad anywhere he's gone. Like he's shown like he can fit whatever system he's put into. However, paying him 60 mil over the next 2 years, that is a horrible deal for the Warriors. Which I think, what is it like between Butler and Curry now? That's like 77% of their cap space
Yeah, I
off
want to
of
say
two
it's
players.
75% between those two. If you add in Draymond Green, 83% of the Warriors
Yeah.
cap space are going to those three players. And my only question and issue with that is you didn't trade Jonathan Kaminga. So how are you going to pay him?
Yep.
Because he didn't sign that extension like Moody did earlier on. So what does that look like when it comes up and you're having to pay Jonathan Kaminga? I just don't know where that money's going to come from. But again, I think they're in win now mode right now, and that will just be a problem for a later date. I agree. I actually think this is really going to help Golden State's defense. You got Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler on the court at the same time, plus
And Gary
Jonathan
Payton.
Kaminga. Yeah, Gary Payton. Jonathan Kaminga is very lanky, can be a good defender at times as well if he wants to. I think this team's defense just got a lot better. Also, just the experience that Jimmy Butler brings, and he's just a winner, right? A winner and a great clutch player. And Golden State has played or tied for the most clutch games this season in the NBA. They just need another closer there alongside Steph Curry because right now, when it goes down to the clutch, everyone knows where the ball is going. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when you have another guy that you can slot in right beside Steph Curry, when it comes to those clutch moments, I think that's going to be very helpful as well. I like the fit as well. It's just really the biggest issue is going to be the shooting, and we'll have to see. All reports indicate that Golden State's going to be big on the buyout market, so expect them to look for shooting. And then the other thing that Golden State might be lacking right now is a little more help and bolster the front court because it looks like they might be starting either Trace Jackson Davis, Quentin Post, or Kevon Looney at that center spot. And I don't necessarily know if that's who you want starting at your center spot right now.
Yeah. Um, Definitely not ideal. But, to be fair, Kevon Looney had a very good game against the Warriors. Or, sorry, not the Warriors, against the Thunder. Not sure if you stayed up for that game, Caleb. It was a very late game. But he looked really good against them. He had like 18 or something, like points like that. But yeah, no, I mean, I think, you know, the Warriors are just going to have, obviously, you got Curry and Butler, and you're just going to have to hope the guys around them are going to step up more than they have this year. Um, but can we just take a minute to talk about the contract? Like, here's the thing. Like, I understand this is. I mean, I think this is a steal for like if you're Jimmy Butler and you're getting 60 mil and you're 35 and your play is gonna be declining. Um, like just what's with like why are the Warriors giving him 60 mil a year?
I think that was the only way that they could lock up Jimmy Butler for a couple of seasons, right? Because all indications were that he wanted to go to Phoenix, and the Warriors were in his first initial round of preferred teams, but it really got to the point where it was like Phoenix or bust. And I really think in the discussions with Jimmy Butler to make sure he was willing and going to stay for not just the rest of the year, they had to sign him to some sort of extension. And obviously, with Jimmy Butler, apparently he wanted as much money as he could get, and the Warriors paid it, and they paid it all.
Yeah. Well, like we said with the Luka trade and the Mavs, if you win a championship, all is forgiven. But you know, I mean, like we said, dude, the Warriors are just not in a good situation cap wise over the next few years. But on the other side of it, with the Heat, they finally get through all the drama. Obviously, losing an All NBA caliber player in Jimmy Butler, but I think they picked up some good pieces in return. Obviously, Wiggins, hasn't been scoring 25 points a game, but I would say he's played more efficiently since being in Golden State, which was always an issue for him in Minnesota. But I think he's figured out how to play efficiently. And then also, I think picking up the first round pick was a big deal, which it is top 10 protected. Which I'm not expecting the Warriors to have a top 10 pick this year, so I'm expecting the Heat are going to retain that. So yeah, I don't know. I obviously it's not preferred to lose Jimmy Butler, but they got through the drama, and they can just focus on playing basketball finally.
I agree, and I like the Wiggins pickup for the Heat as well, and they got some other guys that can help alongside him. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for the Heat. They needed to get out of that because it was just not helpful for the team whatsoever. So the Andrew Wiggins pickup is I think underrated. And honestly, if they weren't getting Beal and they weren't getting KD from the Suns, I don't think they were going to get Booker, so it was probably one of the best case scenarios for the Heat in this instance.
Yeah, I feel like though I think they should have tried to get Kaminga. I mean, don't know how you don't get Kaminga or like Pajimski at the very least, or Gary Payton, but you know it's done. It's passed. So hopefully the Heat. I know they think they got some pretty good players on this team. Obviously, Tyler Hero just named to an All Star team. So hopefully, you know they can put their team together and string some wins. Um, yeah. Anything else on this trade, Caleb?
I want to hear your grades. I know
Ah,
you've been given grades for each of the trades, so hit me
yes.
with it. What do you got for the Warriors? What do you got for the Heat?
All right. So if it wasn't for the extension, I'd give the Warriors an A. But I'm giving the Warriors a B plus because that extension is rough. Which I know we talked about. Obviously, this year it's good, but past this year, this trade might look a little bad. The Heat, I'm giving them a B just because, once again, I don't know how they don't get Kaminga, Moody, Gary Payton, or Pajimski in this trade. I think they should have gotten at least one of those guys. And obviously, like I said, losing Jimmy Butler is, just not nothing. Um, which I know there's two other teams. The Jazz, I gave an F. Like, what are you doing? Like, I am so confused by the Jazz right now. We can talk about them later, but they've just been this third or fourth team in every single trade the past couple of days, and they've just done absolutely nothing but like give or get second round picks. Um, and then the Detroit, I gave them a D plus. Um, yeah. I mean, Lindy Waters, Josh Richardson, not sure how much of an impact they're going to have. I think, it was more just making the trade work for the Heat and the Warriors is why they were included. But I feel like the Pistons are pretty locked up at both of those positions. So,
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm pretty much right there with you. And real quick, I just want to talk about the Jazz, just since you mentioned it, and then we don't have to say another word about them during the episode. I- to me, the Jazz have just an F of an NBA trade deadline. They have so many assets, and for some reason, they just do not want to get rid of them. Like, why is Colin Sexton still on this team? I don't understand. Why is he still on this team? Why is John
John
Collins still on
Collins.
this team? If you want to argue that you want to keep Walker Kessler to develop a little more, sure. Lowry Markkinen, you're just wasting an all-star caliber
Mm,
player when you can get a lot of assets for him as well. I just don't understand what this team is doing. You are tanking, and you will not get away of your draft, like all of your assets that you can get more in draft capital and young players. I don't understand what you're doing. That's all I want to say, but it just doesn't make any sense.
I'm right there with you. And like I said, that's why they got an F, and I'm right there with you. The whole trade season has been an F for them.
Yes.
Um, but there was a trade before that. Which obviously not as big, but I think it's still a pretty significant one for a couple of reasons. Um, Kyle Kuzma is on the move. He got traded to the Bucks, so Kyle Kuzma, Patrick Baldwin, and a second round pick was sent to the Wizards, or sorry, were sent to the Bucks for Chris Middleton, AJ Johnson, and a pick swap. Um, obviously, man, I feel like this is kind of a sad day. Chris Middleton has been on the Bucks since he was undrafted, 11 years, won a championship. Obviously, just been injury riddled the past like 3 years. Which what is he like 34 now or something? He is a shell of the player he was. But I will say, the few minutes he does get, he actually plays pretty well. Um, but I feel like Bucks fans just have to be so sad to see him go.
I agree. And I completely honest, I do not like this trade for the Milwaukee Bucks. Like, I don't think this was a good trade whatsoever. Are you really getting that much more from Kyle Kuzma? Like, that much more? I just
I think it's a gamble
it,
that the
it's a
Bucks are trying to
hu-
take.
it's a huge gamble, but there were reports that Giannis was on board with the trade. So I mean,
That's a first. That is a
yeah,
first. They usually don't consult him, and they usually piss him off, and he almost leaves Milwaukee every time. Because remember when they fired Jason Kidd, and he nearly stormed out of there and like never came back.
yeah,
Obviously, they end up winning a championship like a couple years later. But I feel like something else happened where they like traded someone. Was it the Drew Holiday trade that he was like mad
yes,
about
yes.
after they won a championship with him? And it's just, yeah, I don't know. Which so I'm glad they consulted him on this because I feel like if they didn't, dude, which I feel like there's already rumblings of Giannis, leaving every single year. Um, but yeah, also I don't understand giving AJ Johnson away.
Okay, that was my next one. My next point about why this is such a bad trade.
Yep.
You get rid of Chris Middleton, which is fine. Like getting rid of Chris Middleton is not the issue. The issue is the
Yeah.
gamble of Kyle Kuzma. But then you give up your first round pick. Kudos to the Wizards on this one. The Wizards had a phenomenal trade deadline, and I think it's going very under the radar just because. And when everyone thinks of a good NBA trade deadline, you're getting the stars or getting key pieces.
Yeah.
That they did what the Utah Jazz should have done. They got rid of almost all of their assets, brought in vets that can help the young guys, and then got a ton of draft capital. The
Yep.
Washington Wizards from now till 2031 have 11 first round picks, 12 second round picks, and 3 pick swaps. I mean, this is turning into what the Oklahoma City Thunder was doing. I mean, phenomenal day for the Washington Wizards. Got rid of both Kuzma and Valanciunas, and then obviously brought in some key veteran pieces that are just going to help their team grow. And hey, I think they're right now on like a 3-game winning streak or something like that, which is crazy for the Wizards. And they're just going to let
Yeah.
these young guys play. I love what the Washington Wizards. I think the Wizards won this trade by far.
I wouldn't say they necessarily won by far, but which I think it's important to note. One of the major reasons the Bucks did this trade, they are now, which maybe I haven't looked since yesterday, but as of yesterday when they did the trade, um, they were under the second cap hold, which it was just like under 2 million, 2 million. But I think that is a significant, thing not to gloss over is them being under that second cap hold. But and the Wizards, I mean, they're taking on like 35 million a year with Chris Middleton, who has a player option, which there's no way in
No,
heck he is not picking that up.
he's
Because
definitely
not even
opting
sure
into
if
that
he'll get
thing.
signed after that. So they're going to be paying him a lot of money over the next year. Um, but obviously they're not trying to compete at all for the next probably 3 seasons. So not the end of the world. But I do think this trade's a little closer than people realize. And who knows, Kyle Kuzma, maybe
Kuz
he
could pan
does
out.
help them a little bit.
You're
Yes,
right. Yeah,
but
Kuzma
once
could
again,
pan
it's
out.
it's it's a big gamble. But I don't know. Let's just move on to the bigger trades. Obviously, this wasn't a small trade, but I think there might be a couple other trades that are a little bit more impactful, if you will. So I'm not sure if you want to go into that yet, or if you had something else to say real quick.
No, I'm right there with you. Let's move it along. And I think this might be a big trade just because it finally happened. We've been talking about this guy getting moved for the past couple of seasons, but Brandon Ingram is no longer in New Orleans. He has been traded to Toronto. And the Pelicans get Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, a first round pick, and a second round pick in return. I kind of like what Toronto did here. If you look at their lineup now, it kind of looks a little nice. Not saying they're going to be competing or anything, but I think Brandon Ingram is an underrated star in this league. He is just a consistent 20-point scorer, can get you a bucket. And at times, that's exactly what Toronto needs. I actually like the move from the Toronto Raptors on this one. What about you?
I'm not gonna lie, I did not like this move by the Raptors.
What?
I like it by the Pelicans. What are the Raptors trying to do?
Very
Like,
true.
they're not good. Why are you trying to be good? Like, I don't understand. Like,
But they have like the
they're
young
almost.
They have, like, the young core, though, where it's like you don't really wanna get rid of them. Like, you have
So
so
why
many
is Brandon? So why
young
you bring in
talented
Brandon
players on this.
Ingram?
Who else should they bring in? It's not like they were
They
getting
shouldn't have
Kevin
brought in any.
Durant.
They should have just played the rest of the season, get a high draft pick. Maybe you get Cooper Flag. Who knows? But like,
They're not that bad.
they're pretty bad. um. Anyway, so in my grades, I actually gave them a D just because I did not like this trade
Wow.
for them. Pelicans, I gave them a B plus. I mean, they got a first round for him and a second round
In a
pick,
second. Yep.
which Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk, obviously, they're not the best players, especially at this point in Kelly Olynyk's career, but they can at least like contribute at a level which, now with DeJounte Murray going down for the season, I wonder if the Pelicans, are finally calling it on their year, and joining the Taken for Flag group officially. So yeah, that's just my thoughts. I wasn't the biggest fan. If I'm the Raptors, I don't know why I'm trying to push to win right now.
I just like it for the sense of like looking at their lineup, it makes sense. If it's gonna actually work on the court, who knows? But I mean, their projected starting lineup is Emmanuel Quickly, R.J. Barrett, Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, and Jakob Pertl. Like that makes sense to me. Also, they got Jamal Shed, Grady Dick, Ochai Agbaji, Chris Boucher, still Jacoby Walter. Like they got some good pieces. Obviously, we got to see if they can put it all together. I believe they moved off of and finally got rid of Davion Mitchell, which I believe he went to the
They did.
Heat. So that was good. You kind of made the decision whether or not you were going with Jamal Shed and Davion Mitchell, and they chose Jamal Shed. Obviously, the rookie has been making a little noise this season. I liked it for the Raptors, but I understand where you're coming from. Like, we don't necessarily know what they're doing. They're kind of just middle of the pack right now. Does this necessarily move the needle for him this year? No, but who knows? Maybe um, he'll stay and they can make some noise next year.
For sure. But yeah. So what were your grades for them? I know you were a little bit happier about this trade.
I thought for the Pelicans, they did what they needed to do and they got a couple of picks from Brandon Ingram. Could they have gotten more earlier? Maybe, but all in all, I gave them a B. Just a solid trade. Got rid of Brandon Ingram. Needed that to happen sooner rather than later. And for the Toronto Raptors, I actually gave them a B as well because I was pleasantly surprised. I thought he fits in nicely. But again, it's all in what are they doing. I do think that's a question that we still need answered, and we'll see come the second half of the season on that.
Yeah. You know, and once again, I think that first round pick is a huge get for the Pelicans, especially after seeing like a lot of these trades and not really seeing like Jimmy Butler, like he really didn't bring in that many picks, which I know they got a couple other players in exchange. But they only brought in one first round pick that was top 10 protected for Jimmy Butler. So I think that's a huge like deal that Brandon Ingram was able to get them a first round pick.
For sure. Well, I think this next trade might be one of the biggest trades for a person that might not be as well known as some of the other ones. And that is Mark Williams has been traded to the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers got their center and their replacement for AD. And the Lakers are sending the Hornets their stud rookie, Dalton Knecht, Cam Reddish, a 2031 unprotected first round pick, and a 2030 pick swap. Connor, Mark Williams, how we feeling about him in the purple and gold?
I mean, I'm feeling good. Obviously, he's in a much better situation than he was in. Hornets have been in turmoil for like 50 years at this point. Um, which it's funny. This is a domino effect of the Luka trade, obviously, because I think if the Lakers don't trade Anthony Davis, Mark Williams is still on the Hornets after the deadline. So I'm assuming, obviously, the Lakers approached the Hornets about this trade, just because the Lakers needed a center. I honestly don't think it mattered who it was; they just needed someone. But they got a really good one. Obviously, Mark Williams, not really known for being, an all-star player. But he's solid. He can, dunk the basketball. He can finish. Um, when the rest of his team is not the Hornets, he's a really good defensive anchor, like we saw his freshman year at Duke. Like he was one of the best defenders in the country. Um, Obviously, not been in the best of situations for him recently, so his defensive numbers are actually not very good. Um, but I think the Hornets are getting pretty good value in exchange. So I really like the trade. I think the Lakers obviously they get their defensive big man to complement Luka, which is kind of funny. He traded like Derek Lively for Mark Williams, which they're the same exact player who both went to Duke in like consecutive years. And I mean, they're pretty much the same player. So. I just think it's funny that Luka pretty much has another Derek Lively to play with, and we've seen how good he is with him. Um, so I think it's going to be interesting to see this Laker roster fit together now that they finally have their
I
center.
agree. They got their interior defender, lob threat, rim runner, in Mark Williams. I mean, Mark Williams, he's only 23 years old, too. So he is young, 7-footer, right now averaging about 15 and 10. But the
Yep.
one thing that I'm a little nervous about with Mark Williams is he going to stay healthy? Because he has been hurt a lot in his NBA career so far. But obviously, that's pretty early on. And I thought one cool stat that I saw about Mark Williams is he actually has the longest standing reach in the NBA, longer than Victor Wembanyama. For reference, Victor
Crazy.
Wembanyama's standing reach is 9 feet 7 inches. Mark Williams is 9 feet 9 inches. So although he's 4 inches shorter, that standing reach is crazy. So one of the better lob threats in all the NBA, and I don't think you could ask for something better when it comes to playing with LeBron and Luka, because I mean we saw Luka with Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. He's going to be doing the same exact thing with Mark Williams, and I think it's going to be great. But the one issue I do foresee with this Los Angeles Lakers team is who is going to play defense? Because, I mean, they got a bunch of offensive juggernauts on this team, but I don't know who's going to lock up, because last time we saw Mark Williams go up against Anthony Davis, he put 40 and 20 on his head. So we're going to have to see and hope that Mark Williams can develop a little more on the defensive end, good on the interior, but once you bring him out to the perimeter, that's where he struggles mightily. But all in all, the Lakers needed to get a big man, and they did when they went out and got Mark Williams. I'm got to be honest, I'm sad that they had to trade away Dalton Knecht, because I think Dalton Knecht is going to be in this league for a very long time. He had some great spurts, but it's going to be a good development opportunity for him there in Charlotte. Also, a fun little backcourt with LaMelo Ball, Dalton Knecht, and Brandon Miller. If that continues and goes into the next season, so I honestly like the trade both ways. Connor, what are your grades? Do you have any other thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I said, I don't think the Hornets were expecting to trade him. Um, but I think Don't Connect fits in pretty well. Hornets obviously in LA he was playing behind Reeves. I'm not sure if Reddick was the biggest fan of Connect, and maybe just because he was a rookie, but I think his minutes were just so inconsistent. He could never get into a rhythm. But hopefully with the Hornets, because I know they have a lot of players hurt right now. He can actually get some decent playing time and hopefully show. He can do a lot more than what he showcased in Los Angeles. Um, but big deal though, which I kind of just realized this is, a huge thing was that the Mavs only got one first round pick from the Lakers, which is, if you see here, the Hornets got that second first round pick from the Lakers, which if the Mavs demand that second first round pick from the Lakers, I don't think this trade happens, you know? So once again, it's just an interesting domino effect, that because Luka was traded for pretty much Anthony Davis and that's it, the Lakers were able to make this trade. And honestly, probably stay competitive because I'm not sure how competitive they would be without a center long term.
Hey, Mark Williams bringing in an unprotected first round. That's that's kind of crazy to me, at least. Like an unprotected first for Mark Williams, and they get Dalton Connect. The way I think he can develop, I really like this trade for the Hornets. If I had to grade them, I would be giving the Charlotte Hornets an A minus. I just love the
Mhm.
fact they got a pick and connect. And then the Lakers, the reason I'm giving the Lakers this grade is because just their offseason as a whole, and that's just an A. They did exactly what they needed to do. Once they got Luka Doncic, they went and got their lob threat and their big man and Mark Williams. So as long as he stays healthy, this is exactly what they needed.
That's funny. I think I had the same grades. I had the Lakers an A, the Hornets an A plus. Um, yeah, no, I mean, I think it was a pretty even trade both ways. Like we said, the Lakers were desperate for a big man. They found their big man, one that averages 15 and 10. And the Hornets, like we just talked about, got some good value in return for him. So I think it's a win-win both ways. I think it's also important to note, like we said, Williams is only 23. So the Lakers will have Luka and Mark Williams, for years to come. So it's a good foundation. Which also important to note, the Hornets did get Nurkic, like we said. So it's not like they don't have a big man on the roster anymore, because they traded Nick Richards earlier in the year, a few weeks ago,
to the Suns. Yeah.
So for a couple hours, they were left without a starting center. But they have Nurkic, which I'm assuming he'll be their starting center now. So yeah.
Yep, I agree. Well, this next trade, sometimes the rich just gets richer, man. And that is the Cleveland Cavaliers bring in DeAndre Hunter. If we didn't think they could get any better, they go and bring in DeAndre Hunter, just the 3-and-D guy from the Atlanta Hawks, and send out Karis LeVert, George Niang, 3 second-round picks and 2 pick swaps. So it's not like they didn't give anything up to get him. But man, this starting lineup now is just so scary. Pairing DeAndre Hunter next to Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell in the backcourt, and then you got Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. I mean, the Cavs are looking scary if they weren't already.
Yeah. I mean, I think he solved a huge problem for them, which was on the wing. They had players who could shoot but couldn't play defense. They had players who could play defense but couldn't shoot, which DeAndre Hunter now fixes that problem. He can shoot and he can play defense. But little interesting because they didn't get rid of, I think, some of those players that are at his position, which I found a little bit surprising, like Sam Merrill, Isaac Okoro, a couple of the guys I'm talking about, Dean Wade. Just interesting. Obviously, I think he'll be starting over all of them. But obviously, they gave up Karis LeVert, but I feel like they really didn't give up that much. I know we said 3 second-round picks and 2 pick swaps, but in the grand scheme of things, I feel like those aren't really that big of a deal. Like, they didn't give up, like I said, Isaac Okoro, or Dean Wade, who have been huge contributors for them, on opposite ends. But I think, like you said, the rich got richer by giving up pretty much nothing.
Yeah, and they got exactly what they needed. Also brought back together Ty Jerome and DeAndre Hunter from that NCAA tournament winning team there in Virginia. So that's a cool little piece of this one. But man, if you're DeAndre Hunter, how happy do you have to be getting out of Atlanta and going into just a contender in the Cleveland Cavaliers? I mean, I think I still have Boston in this, but the Cavaliers, just in terms of who I think is coming out of the East, they're just right there and just continued to make great moves, especially with bringing in DeAndre Hunter for this one. But Connor, I got a question for you on the Atlanta Hawks side. What are they doing? Can you help me understand the Atlanta Hawks? Because I truly don't understand what this team is doing.
Dude, I have no idea. For my grade, I think I gave them a C plus. Just because I don't know. There have been talks about them deconstructing their roster, and so I think unloading Hunter was probably a big financial thing for them as well. But it's just like, are you tanking or are you trying to win? Because I feel like if they were trying to break down, they would have been trading a lot more players than they did. Like, why is Clint Capella still on the team? Honestly, I'm sure there's some people who are asking, oh, if they're rebuilding, why is Trae Young still on the team? Which not sure if they'll ever move on from him. But you know, I feel like it's when Jalen Johnson went down. I feel like the Hawks kind of, at least the management, assumed their season was done for. A player averaging like 20 and 10 a game. That's a tough loss. Didn't really have anyone to replace that kind of production with. So I kind of wonder if they're just like, yep, let's just scrap this season and hope to start again next season.
But the thing I don't understand, and well, I'll bring it back. Trae Young, I think Trae Young and Kevin Durant are actually gonna be two people that we're gonna be talking about this summer on are they getting traded or not? Because I don't think Trae Young's happy in Atlanta. I mean, what have they done? They keep bringing people in, but then they keep sending people out. So they just sent away DeAndre Hunter, and then they brought in Terrence Mann and Bones Highland and sent out Bogdanovic. It's like they keep just giving this like give and take, but they're really not getting any better. Probably getting a little worse. But if you're gonna do that, why aren't you getting rid of all your assets? Like, I don't understand why you still have Clint Capella or or Trae Young, to be honest. Like, if you want to do that, keep your Dyson Daniels, keep your Zachary Resus, keep Jalen Johnson. But this is when you got to start getting rid of your assets, and you're just bringing in others that aren't going to get you anything later on, in my opinion. So, honestly, the Atlanta Hawks is one of my big losers for this trade deadline because they really didn't establish what they're trying to do. They're just sitting in mediocrity, and they've got to pick a side at some point.
Yeah, no, right there with you. Which I don't know. I feel like they're just like, oh, Trae Young drug us to the conference finals. Don't even remember what year that was. It was at least 3 or 4 years ago at this point. And I feel like they're still trying to hold on that he'll do that again. But obviously, it's just not been working. Obviously, some of their players haven't been able to stay healthy. Um, and so I don't know. I just don't want to keep repeating it. Just like, why are you sort of rebuilding, but not rebuilding? Once again, maybe it's a thing where, oh, let's just tank the rest of the season. Maybe we'll get, a high trade, make some, and then trade that pick or what. I don't know. But I'm sure Atlanta fans are pretty confused on the whole situation right now.
I agree. All right, what did you give your grade for this DeAndre Hunter trade to the Cavaliers?
Yeah, Cavaliers got an A plus. Hawks got a C plus. Just because they did get a lot of picks and, like we said, some pick swaps. Maybe they turned that into something. But yeah, just C plus. But like we said, the Cavs addressed their biggest need, which huge win. And I'd be scared if I was the East.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I'm about right there with you in terms of grades as well. I think the Cavaliers kind of solidified their roster and who they're going to be running with come playoff time, and then the Hawks again just got to make a decision on the direction of their future and where they want to go. Well, I think those were the big trades from the trade deadlines, but I'm going to go ahead and rattle off just a few other notable ones that went down. And Connor, if there are any that you want to talk about, feel free to jump in. But we had the Mavs trading Quentin Grimes and a 2025 second round pick to the 76ers for Caleb Martin and a 2030 second round pick. So really it was Grimes for Martin with an exchanging of second round picks.
That's an interesting one because I feel like that further disputes Nico Harrison's claim that it's winning now and in the future. Just because Quentin Grimes was younger than Caleb Martin, and they traded their 2025 pick for a 2030 pick. So I think that's just the thing. I feel like they're production wise going to be pretty similar. So I think it's just kind of like another confusing Dallas trade.
Hey, one thing to note about this Dallas Mavericks team, though, they played the Boston Celtics tonight without Anthony Davis and won. Without Anthony Davis and PJ Washington, they started Dante Exum and Kessler Edwards, and they won. And they didn't have Derek Lively. I mean, they won 127 to 120 in Boston.
Which obviously not going to go in great detail, but Celtics aren't looking too good right now. And I think there's a couple reasons for it. The biggest one is their starters are playing heavy minutes, and I think they have not consistently had their starting lineup this whole season. But yeah, obviously a lot of other trades, but I think that's a very interesting storyline this season. Is the Celtics just look wiped?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, can they make it back? I think they will, but as you mentioned, I mean, definitely not the dominant season that we thought they were going to have. We also have the Suns traded Jusuf Nurkic and a first round pick to the Hornets for Cody Martin, Misic, and a second round pick, as we mentioned earlier. That Hawks Clippers trade for Bogdanovic and then Terrence Mann and Bones Highland. The Heat traded PJ Tucker to the Raptors for Davion Mitchell. And then Bagley was sent to the Grizzlies from the Washington Wizards in I believe it's in a 3-team trade. So the Wizards in this got Marcus Smart, Colby Jones, Alex Lynn, and a first round pick. The Memphis Grizzlies were the other team. They got Marvin Bagley, Johnny Davis, and a second round pick. And then the Kings got Jake LaRavia, which I was pretty surprised that the Grizzlies got rid of LaRavia because it seemed like they were liking him a good bit this season. So those were trades of note. Anything to add on to those at all, Connor?
No, I mean, I think the Hawks one is going to be a little interesting, just because I think Terrence Mann and Bones Highland are just kind of an interesting pieces that got moved. But not gonna lie, I think that last trade Bagley sent to the Grizzlies, I don't really think it's gonna have huge impact unless Bagley and Davis, end up playing a lot for the Grizzlies. I would say, man, Oklahoma State. It's hard to see what Marcus Smart's career has turned into. After being such a staple for the Celtics for so long, it just kind of hurts to see his career just absolutely plummet.
I really thought the Wizards were going to buy him out because it seemed like they were going to do that with some of the other guys, and then they didn't. So it seems like they're just want him for that veteran leadership there for the Washington Wizards team and the young core that they got for the rest of the season. But Connor, before we go, I want to ask you your trade deadline winners and losers. You can give me one, you can give me multiple, but who do you
Hmm.
think won in this NBA trade deadline, and who do you think absolutely lost?
All right. Well, let's do the winners first. Winners, big one is the Spurs. Um, and then let's see. Man, I just had another one. Uh, Honestly, the Cavs as well. Spurs and Cavs. I think they got two really good players, and I think that their conferences should be a little wary of these two teams.
I agree. I put both of those on my list, but I'll give you two others. I think obviously the Lakers are a winner. Anytime you can get Luka Doncic without trying to get Luka Doncic, that's an absolute W in my book. I mean, literally all you said was yes to going to coffee, and all of a sudden Luka Doncic was on your team. So sometimes that happens, and it seems like that happens to the Los Angeles Lakers a lot. So obviously they're a winner, and they added on Mark Mitchell, so they were able to replace AD. Obviously not the same caliber, but had to get a starting center, and they were able to do it. And then I'm telling you, I said it earlier. My other winner is the Washington Wizards. They did what they needed to do. They got rid of assets and they brought in a lot of trade capital. Or sorry, they got rid of their trade capital and brought in a lot of assets. I mean, they have like 23 picks from now till 2031, and they still got a few more pieces that they might be able to move in the offseason. I just love what the Washington Wizards have done in this NBA trade deadline. It doesn't always look pretty, but they did exactly what they needed to do. All right, hit me with your losers.
This is going to pain me to say, dude. Well, I'm going to say the obvious one first. The Dallas Mavericks trading Luka, only getting once again, not that Anthony Davis is a bad player, but just only getting Anthony Davis for 25-year-old multiple first team All NBA. That's an L. Houston Rockets are big losers. Didn't make any big trades. The only thing they really did was they traded a couple of second round picks and they got Jaden Springer from the Celtics. But dude, as good defensively as this team is, they're on a 5-game now. They blew a lead to the Timberwolves again. Their offense looks so bad. They needed some player to come bring in offense, especially now that Van Fleet might be out extended time. We know Jabari Smith is already out extended time. And it's just so funny because you would think a team with Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün is not going to be bad on the offensive end, that the defensive end would be their struggle. It's been the offensive end. Defense, obviously, we know top 3 in the NBA. I think they're big losers. They didn't get anyone of note that can help them with that. So, major L for Houston and Dallas.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm right there with you, especially on the Mavericks. When you get rid of Luka Doncic, that's an L. My 2 losers are the Chicago Bulls.
Mm,
You had a bunch of assets and you had a bunch of trade capital, but you just held on to them for too long and you just continued to do it. And you obviously didn't bring anything in. Like you got rid of Zach LaVine finally, but you didn't get rid of Vucevic. There were talks about Kobe White or Lonzo Ball. You kept both of them. I just
Resign Lonzo Ball.
yeah, resign Lonzo Ball. I don't really know what you're doing there. And that's why I'm lumping them in right there with the Atlanta Hawks. Again, I don't know what you're doing. You're getting rid of some players, but then you're bringing others in, and it just doesn't really seem like you're making a decision. And then a little bonus one, the Utah Jazz. You did absolutely nothing, and you didn't do anything you needed to do. You should have done more what the Wizards did, but for some reason, you're so hard pressed to keep on to those people. Also, you helped the Los Angeles Lakers get Luka Doncic, so that right there is an L. So those are my 3 losers for the NBA trade deadline. Well,
Hey, they did help your Warriors get Jimmy Butler. So,
you're right. You're right. So I appreciate you for that. But I'm sorry and sad for all the Western Conference for Luka going to the Lakers, because now they're going to be in contention for the next decade at least.
yep.
All right. Well, I think that's a wrap for the NBA trade deadline. Connor, anything else you got before we go?
No, wrapping up a crazy week. It seemed just like Saturday on, like it was just fire after fire from Shams, man. Just come in with these trades. But I'm excited. All-Star game's almost here. Almost, that nice little break that the players have right before finishing off the last part of the season. So I'm excited. We're getting into the home stretch.
For sure. And that brings me to our next podcast dropping Monday morning. We'll be talking a little bit about the All-Star reserves, maybe the teams that were just announced today. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Appreciate everybody listening and watching on YouTube. If you are, smash that like button, hit subscribe. If you're on any of the podcast platforms, a 5-star rating, we greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you next time on Courtside. Peace.
Peace.